Hey guys, and I'm back with another movie review, and I'm going to talk about the Joker sequel, Joker Folie Deux, because this movie is getting a lot of hate to the point that I was even not looking forward to actually seeing it, and was expecting when I went to the cinema, I was so expecting to just like hate it like most people and just be either bored by it or made angry, like all that stuff, expecting not to enjoy it at all and like seeing it only just like reviewed for you guys. But I have to say, the hate is very overblown. It's certainly not a movie for everybody, and some of the things I can understand why people might not like, but whenever I hear saying that this is insult to the Joker character, makes me feel like people clearly haven't seen the first movie, because this movie is in some ways very similar to the first movie. Like, but by the way, there will be huge, gigantic spoilers, so there's some of the things that we'll have to address later that people don't like. First, I'll talk about the actual movie. Some of the things that people didn't like, I might have to address later, because this review will contain gigantic spoilers. So first, I'll actually talk about the general idea and what I liked in the movie before we start getting into more in-depth details, because to truly address some of the issues, you truly have to really get into spoilers. So the first thing I will say, but first I'll talk about the first Joker movie, because in all honesty, I'm not going to lie, I always felt like the first Joker was actually kind of overrated. Like, I always thought it was a great psychological thriller, but at the same time, as a origin story of the Joker, in all honesty, I actually never liked it. Like, I always thought it would work better as just an original character movie, focusing on as an original character psychological thriller, because what I always loved about the Joker is that Joker is not a sympathetic. He's this like monster clown that like that fights Batman, and one of the most amazing things about him is that he doesn't really have a backstory. Is that like, and he certainly was never suited to be sympathetic. So by giving him a sympathetic origin story, again, as I just said, I thought it was a really great standalone psychological thriller, but I never thought it was really a good Joker origin story. And I certainly did not think it needed a sequel. Absolutely not. In fact, I thought this was a perfect example of a movie that absolutely shouldn't have a sequel, because it was a really good standalone psychological thriller story, and that's all there was need. Like, there was absolutely no need for a sequel. Those are not types of movies that should really have a sequel, but as soon as the movie was successful and everyone loved it, it was inevitable that sequel would get announced, which it did. But in all honesty, I am confused by some of the hate, because I think if you love the first movie, then, unless you really wanted it to be an origin story, then I don't see why you wouldn't love this one. Like, this movie has plenty of things the first one already had. It still very much deals with, it has the same dark atmosphere and all that, and it still very much deals with mental health issues and all that, and plenty of the things that the first movie had, this one very much has too. And whenever people say, is it a musical? Well, yes, it kind of is. Actually, I say it very much is. Although, I have to admit, the musical parts are some of the least interesting parts. Especially that most of the singing is done by Joaquin Phoenix, not Lady Gaga. Which is strange. Like, I mean, sure, he plays the main character, but you have a literal singer as a supporting character. And yet, most of the singing is done by Joaquin Phoenix. And I'm not going to lie, I'm not a particularly huge fan of Lady Gaga anyway, but again, she's an actual singer, so she probably should do most of the singing parts. And she does some, but most of the singing is actually done by Joaquin Phoenix. And that's what I would say is a pretty valid criticism of the movie. I think the performances in this movie are phenomenal. Like, Joaquin Phoenix was fantastic as Arthur Fleck in the first Joker, and here he continues being amazing. I in general think Joaquin Phoenix is a phenomenal actor, and he did a phenomenal job in the first movie, and he continues being phenomenal in this movie. Like, he was born to play Arthur Fleck. Not the Joker, but certainly Arthur Fleck. And Lady Gaga was also really good as this version of Harley Quinn, mostly referred as Lee actually, But, well, I could never picture Lady Gaga as a classic Harley Quinn. She's perfectly fit to play this version of her. And another phenomenal actor that I have to also talk about is Brendan Gleeson. He's really terrific in the role of an Arkham guard. Like, he's really scary and intimidating and really unlikable. Yep. Brendan Gleeson was a perfect fit to play this Arkham guard. And again, is the movie an unnecessary sequel to the first one? Very much so. Like, the first movie told a complete story and there was really no reason for a sequel. It was a perfect example of a movie that should very much be a standalone. So really, for a sequel to exist, it has to justify its existence. And at least in my opinion, it very much does so, because I've seen plenty of criticism online saying that how it's a middle finger to the first movie and how basically it's completely like, for people who love the first movie, like it's basically a middle finger to people who love the first movie and how it's basically an anti-first movie, but I couldn't disagree more. Like, I think this is a perfect example of a sequel that actually does somewhat justify its existence. Like, for example, Arthur Fleck, yep, that's what we'll call him, because I refuse to call him the Joker. I didn't call him the Joker even in the first movie, and this movie basically confirmed it, that this is not the Joker, this is Arthur Fleck. And Arthur Fleck is very much recognizably the very much same character that he was in the previous movie, but we learn more about him, and he actually continues on with his character arc from the first movie. And then when he also meets Harley Quinn, played by Lady Gaga, but I say, and Harley Quinn, by the way, is mostly referred to as Lee in this movie, but I have to say, the romantic relationship between Arthur Fleck and Lee is actually quite different than a classic relationship between Joker and Harley Quinn, because we all know that the classic relationship between Joker and Harley Quinn is that she's his like former psychiatrist, and then she falls in love with him and then tries to find the good in him and examine him psychologically, but then instead he breaks her because of that, and she becomes just like blindly and madly in love with him while he just abuses her at every opportunity. But this is actually a quite different take on the Harley Quinn and Joker relationship, or more like Arthur Fleck again, because, and this is one of the first spoilers, because in this, it actually feels like Arthur is actually way more in love with Lee than she's with him. Like, she views him as this like evil Joker and loves this part about him, when deep down Arthur Fleck is just a poor deranged man who's just mentally ill, and deep down he's not really a bad person despite the plenty of the things he's done. Again, as already said, both his fans, as well as people that want Arthur executed, view him as this deranged psychotic killer, kind of like the classic Joker that we all know and love, but deep down, as I said, he's a poor deranged man with mental health issues, and deep down you can't really say he's a bad person. And if anything, and now we're getting into a gigantic spoiler territory, I think that might actually partially stem from why the movie is so hated. But in all honesty, I don't know why, because if anything, it's actually closer to Spirit of Batman comics. So now, before we get to this big spoiler, I think that people who hate it are either people who haven't really seen the first movie and instead think that this assassinated the Joker, or people who want the backstory of the first movie to be a default backstory for the Joker character, which I don't understand why. Like, as I said in the beginning of the video, the first Joker movie, while I do think it's a great psychological thriller, at the end of the day, I don't actually like it as a backstory for the Joker. Again, I always considered Arthur Fleck and Joker as a separate character, even though technically they were officially considered the same character. So unless you want the first movie to be a backstory for the Joker, like, then I don't see why you hate this movie so much. Because, again, Arthur Fleck is recognizably the same character as he was in the first movie, very much so. And now we'll talk about the ending, because the ending in court, when Arthur gets sentenced to death penalty, he also confesses that he's not the Joker and that he deeply feels bad about everything he's done because he's just like Arthur Fleck, just a deranged man that with mental health issues. And then, a gigantic spoiler, he gets killed by one of his own former fans, and then that fan starts laughing maniacally as the Joker. And then carves a smile to his face. Obviously we know what it refers to. Which, in some ways, we can basically make an argument that this former fan will be the classic Joker that Batman will fight and that we are all familiar with. So if anything, the main message of the movie is that Arthur Fleck is actually not the Joker, but more like an original Joker, a precursor to the Joker. Which, in all honesty, I like that. I actually think that it basically keeps the consistency of a Joker having no backstory. Because to say that this is disrespectful to the comics is just silly. In fact, I think you can make an argument that the first movie was more disrespectful to the comics because they made Joker sympathetic while Thomas Wayne, this greedy rich businessman. So if anything, you can basically make an argument the first movie was very much an anti-comic movie by completely changing Joker and Thomas Wayne. But, as I said, the first movie was a great psychological thriller, but I didn't quite like it as a backstory for the Joker. And again, the only reason they made it the Joker was marketing, because not many people would go see the movie if it was just another psychological thriller about a mentally challenged man. But overall, I have to say, I really like Joker Folie à Deux. I think it's on the same level of quality as the first movie. It's certainly not for everybody, but I suggest you go see the movie and make up your own mind. Will you like it? Will you not? We'll see. But I personally really enjoyed it, and I thought that, at the very least for me, if you love the first movie, you should like this one. So, here is my review of Joker Folie à Deux. And thank you all of you for checking out this video. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you soon, bye!